next submitter, who is Barnaby Bennett.
Kia ora koutou.
Barnaby, would you like to just pull that microphone a bit closer?
That one?
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. Again, you've seen the process. We've got your written material. We've got about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'll try and talk for 5 or 6 minutes.
Yep,
I might just put
then
my
we can take
clock
questions
on so I can watch that. So I'm Barnaby Bennett. I'm a PhD candidate at a university in Sydney, but I grew up in Whangarei and have been here for about 4 years. I'm a co-director of a publishing company called Free Range Press, and we published a book about a year ago called Once in a Lifetime, which is the biggest and most comprehensive review of the recovery plan that's taken place so far. And the press said it was the most important post-quake book published so far. So we've gifted each of you a copy of the book to have a look at.
Thank you.
It's full of some really important stuff, which we think over the next 2 or 3 years has quite an active role to play in how to reconceive and consider what happens. So I hope it's considered. I won't talk exactly to what I wrote because you've already received it, and there's some repetition in there that you'll get today. So there's a few issues that have come up today that I'm going to pick up on. I think it's important to acknowledge the goodwill that's taken place post-quake in Christchurch across the board. I think everyone in New Zealand reacted in the way that you'd hope and expect, and I think Sarah was a part of that. There was a real need for strong governance, and in a place with the particular democratic makeup we've got, that was really important, and I think that took place, and across party there was really good support. And I think there's a lot of criticism of Sarah, but we forget to probably acknowledge the important things, that there wasn't population flight, there hasn't been massive capital erosion of the city, there is some confidence building in the downtown, and generally life is starting to sort of return to some sort of sense of normality 5 years on, which at an international level is not bad given the scale of the disaster that hit. While saying that, there's obvious real problems, and I think this bill's a really amazing, exciting opportunity to pick up and learn from the mistakes, inevitable mistakes of the last 5 years, and pick up our game a little bit. To me, the really significant problems almost all stem around the notions of participation, engagement, and the role of the citizens in what's been happening. So I think financially there's been too little investment, and there's still a big struggle for investment. I think that's acknowledged. There's been really big delays to the projects that the Crown has led, and some of that's inevitable. And I think there's a real lack of, there was a 75% of people in a recent press poll said they don't understand or feel like there's a strong vision for Christchurch, which those things combined, when a Crown agency came in to take control, to set up a strong vision, to get investment, has to be accepted as a failure of that agency. And what we're doing now has to take on board those problems, I think. I think a lot of it stems from misunderstanding what engagement is. I think the left sees it as a human right that needs to take place to have democracy, and the right sees it as sort of something that's necessary but is often a hindrance to the quick progress that's needed in these circumstances. I think on the first level, there's the role of the public is sort of like a Geiger counter for issues and problems, and when that Geiger counter goes off, when there's an issue, whether it's the residential red zone, whether it's problems with something like the convention centre, whether it's EQC, you don't get rid of the Geiger counter because it's causing problems. You actually look at and let the things bubble up and let them become part of the democratic processes. You don't stop consulting, which is what we've had in Christchurch. The second one is local leadership. If you look around at the projects that have succeeded in the last 5 years, and there's plenty of them, just went to Restart Mall for lunch and it's booming. It's full of people and colour and life. You go to New Regent Street, you go to the Gap Filler projects, you go down to C1, anywhere around the city where there's life, it's either buildings that manage not to get demolished or it's temporary stuff that happened post-quake, and that's 5 years after. You look at the Sarah-led projects, out of 18, only 3 have been completed within the 2.5 years of the CCD being established. Almost all of them have been delayed. There's significant worries about 3 or 4 of them ever happening. And if you look at the other local leadership things about the Arts Centre, Isaac Theatre Royale, a lot of them are led by strong groups that understand their role, that have public support. They're able to get significant investment on board that public support because people get it and they know what their role is. So on that level, even though the procedure's a bit weird, I think appointing Andre Lovett's a really positive step. I think he's a great person to put in the position. The last element of engagement that I think has been missed substantially post-quake is the psychosocial role of actually enabling people to participate and contribute to the visioning of their city. The Prime Minister's Science Advisor, Sir Peter Gluckman, explained that very clearly in May 2011 after the quakes, that one of the big dangers is you disempower people further by not letting them participate in the reimagining of their city. And if you go back to the 18 anchor projects, I think 3 of them have had some sort of minor citizen engagement in them. And there's a book Charles Montgomery visited about a year ago or 9 months ago, I think, and explained very clearly there's a lot of scientific evidence now that the process of enabling people to engage makes people happier in cities, even if the outcomes don't change. It's important stuff. Of the issues that have been coming up, I think one that I fully support is the re-engagements of ecological and environmental concerns in the city. I think if you look out, I think we can look back in 40 years like we hope to, and I think it'll be the residential red zone and what happens with that we'll be most proud of, but it needs to engage with the ecological environmental status and presence of that place as a huge issue, and I think the community, you've heard from that this morning. I'd just like to quickly pick up on, understandably there's a concern about this $16 or $17 billion that the Crown's put in, and that there needs to be some oversight for that, and that's fair. It's a massive amount of money. I think it needs unpacking a little bit though. If you look at it, a substantial amount of that's EQC money, which is an obligation from a completely separate bill that's got nothing to do with this, so that halves it. You then break it down into SCIRT, which again, that money's almost all been spent, and I think largely well spent, and it's progressed reasonably well, so that almost halves it again. Then there's only about $3 or $4 billion that's actually been committed so far, and that's in very tightly contained projects that are already committed to that don't need more government oversight. It's like the Justice Precinct, the Convention Centre and things like that. There's no need to control the rest of the city to protect those projects. And Crown Co has been set up specifically to look after those investments. And on top of that, a huge amount of money has been coming into the government through GST and tax intake from this rebuild. I think it's a $50 billion rebuild, and tax is a significant part of that. So a big part of that money is the hard work, the industry, the community engagement, the sort of life of Christchurch in the first place. So I question the sort of logic of needing oversight over the whole city because of an investment when you break it down a bit. I have a few more minutes. I think if it's to be a true meaningful engagement, I think this notion of the community needs to be present. There's the three stakeholders which are really important, the Crown and the Council and Ngāi Tahu. I think the presence of the community and the people within that, it needs to be not forgotten. And the goal of Christchurch and the potential of Christchurch is that we can be world leading in this stuff. I don't think the skills have really been there so far. I think Sarah's been remarkably poor at that. I think the Council's been a little bit better, but I think there's an extraordinary amount of potential, and there's a lot of people training themselves up about how to get better at participation. And this bill's incredibly exciting because it's the potential to unlock that finally. And I think we can all look back in 10 years and think this is the moment where we actually let that potential grow. The key thing to that though is trust, and I think I call on the committee to support the government, to support the Prime Minister, to support the Minister, to support the Mayor, to make a little bit of a leap of faith with the community, to the people that have been talking today and who they represent and to who you represent, and to have a little bit of confidence that we understand the issues. I think you'll get that today. No one understands issues more than concerned communities, and that we will elect the right people. We will harass and we will lobby and we will protest when things are going wrong, but we also have the best interests of everyone at heart. And there's this sort of magical thing waiting to be unlocked, I think, if this bill's framed in the right way, and putting ministerial control and positioning over every point of that place is just going to continue to frustrate and slow down. And you've heard that again and again, how the bureaucracy, how the minister signing off is restricted, and cause real damage to the community in the last 5 years. And the final comment is that's not a comment on the people within the bureaucracy or the minister, it's the systematic setup. There's no city in the world that's governed by somewhere else that's accountable, that's successful, and there's endless reports of post-disaster situations only working when they're locally led. Sarah's own documentation for the transition bill said that there's a submission you'll get from a doctor in Auckland who's got 35 years worth of experience, who talks about it. The book has about 4 or 5 essays that talk about it only works when it's locally led. There's a systematic problem here, and you'll hear today about how to resolve that. And I'll leave it at that, I think. Thanks.
Barnaby, thank you very much. We've got time probably for one question if there is one. In that case, quickly, look.
Thank you. That was really refreshing, actually, to kind of hear, that there are things that have been identified as actually working. And obviously, when you actually compare this, I just see in your book, there's a part there on in Italy, L'Aquila. And, looking at a country with the resources that Italy has, the economy, the population, and yet, nothing's happened there. And it's been over, 10, 15 years. So when we liken ourselves, we kind of beat ourselves up, I suppose, in New Zealand, but people overseas look at us and think, well, wow, you know, like, look what's happened in that short amount of time. So I think too that you've reinforced actually what the Mayor was saying this morning, is that we have an opportunity here, you know, to actually be able to put in place some world-leading legislation and implementation, you know, basically around picking up on some of the things that have happened, good things, and some that haven't been so good, and let's work on that, and that's what we're trying to do with this legislation. So kia ora, thank you, and we appreciate the koha as well.
Thanks.
Ngā mihi.
Barnaby, thank you very much. We appreciate you taking time to be with us today, for your written submission and for your comments and the views. Thank you. And the book.
I think the next person is Jessica Halliday from Te Pūtahi, and I'm on the board of that, so I'm just
Oh,
going
you want
move
to
to the
join?
left.
Yep,
So.
absolutely. Come on up. That's no problem at all. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you.
As with Barnaby's, we've got your written submission, or the Trust's written submission, and we'd like now to hear from you, please.
Great.
Thank you.
Tēnā koutou, ko Jessica Halliday tōku ingoa, ko aho te kai whakahaere o Te Pūtahi, Christchurch Centre for Architecture and City Making. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to comment. The Trust would like to thank you for the opportunity to comment on the Greater Christchurch Regeneration legislation. And thank you for coming to Christchurch to hear us. That really does mean an enormous amount. Te Pūtahi wishes to acknowledge the government's commitment to the recovery of Greater Christchurch. I'll tell you first a little bit about ourselves, so you know who we are and what we've done and what we do, and then I'll make just one point. Te Pūtahi's purpose is simple. Our kaupapa is to grow people and places together. Te Pūtahi has evolved from Festa, the Festival of Transitional Architecture, an event in Christchurch, an urban regeneration event, which we have presented 3 times since 2012. It's now biennial, so we don't present it again till next year. We work collaboratively with a wider community of creative people who make Festa. And together we have brought over 60,000 people into this otherwise largely empty city since 2012. We create instant urbanity, we connect the community with their inner city, support inner city businesses and entrepreneurs, and in doing this, catalyse change in Christchurch Ōtautahi. Te Pūtahi is an independent place where people can connect and grow their aspirations for our city. It's a place where people can experience new ideas, connect with different partners in community, and enrich their understanding of how we best rebuild our city, and how they can apply that understanding through their practice as citizens or built environment professionals. We want to work with the government and with Regenerate Christchurch to find solutions to the challenges we are facing in Christchurch Ōtautahi, now and into the future. How we all work together is the most important aspect of this legislation, and I get the sense that that's all you've heard all day today. So, my one point. The legislation should reflect the positive sense that the communities and people of Christchurch want to be actively involved and participate in the regeneration of their city. People here are eager, they are talented, and they have, over the last 5 years, accumulated a wealth of experience and expertise. The government should want to use these people, and in its current draft, the bill doesn't adequately represent the strong potential in this city. I would like to highlight the risk you're taking. Your proposal isn't neutral to our proposal of an improved approach. Your proposal encourages Christchurch to feel as people that are done to, not as citizens active in their own lives and cities. This is a message you've heard all morning and that we are hearing too. How about in the frustrations of people from outside Christchurch, from example Auckland, and the frustrations they have about us? This disempowerment of citizens has been shown globally to stimulate a cycle of victimhood and a cycle of entitlement to public services. and in the long term will require significant public investment to turn around. You can change that. So how can the bill harness the energy, the commitment, the talent and passion of the people that live here? The solution does not lie solely in appointing or employing those people directly. Somehow it's about developing local agency and power through your legislation. That's key to bringing those two together, those employed by central and local government on regeneration and local citizens. And so we are somewhat confused by the current approach. It isn't reflective of best practice, as Barnaby said, best practice globally and locally. And in fact, the approach we should be taking is already modelled in this country, in the tamaki regeneration. It exemplifies this best practice of harnessing the local community and should be the model for our regeneration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, are there questions, members? Eugenie.
Thank you. Could we have a copy of your presentation? If you could email that through the secretary.
Sure.
But the tamaki regeneration, what is it there? Is it in terms of the joint enterprise to develop housing, is it the principles in the legislation?
It's the principles. And it's then also the development of further principles through the agency's statement of intent. They develop those with the community.
There's no provision in this bill for a statement of intent?
No. Yeah. So, if you read, I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but developing the tamaki way of working, we're keen for an ototahi way of working with the government.
Thanks.
Todd.
Just to follow up, and you're right, there's been a theme that's gone through most submissions thus far. And as somebody who's not from Christchurch, I'd like to, I guess, ask you your views on whether you still can connect effectively through your established relationships with the City Council and then, of course, potentially through the draft process that this bill enables once a draft plan of regeneration has been notified. Why do you think that someone such as passionate as you and as articulate as you can't use both those informal relationships and then the formal process as outlined in this bill to have your voice considered as part of, the many hundreds of voices of what the future of this city should look like?
I think the key thing clearly is that the Minister does sign off on all those plans. And it isn't detailed in the bill what other ways, other than the existing ways, might be used to connect with people.
But you would accept that a minister signing off does not necessarily mean that the view that comes from the gravel up, as the previous speaker spoke to, cannot be a part of what gets signed off.
I think a lot of our fear comes from the fact that we've lived through the last 3 years of many, many incredible projects not being signed off and being squashed around interim use, around local businesses leading stuff, around different ideas to the city plan that would have been cheaper, that would have been easier, that would have been really good for the community, that have been either lost in the bureaucracy or specifically not signed off because of political fears by the minister or people within various parts of them. So that's why we have a little bit of worry about the ongoing continuation of that role, because we know there's so much energy that's gone into certain things that have disappeared and not been able to happen as a result. And if you look at that map over there, or that blue area, the government owns a lot of the city. There's a lot of resistance that can be put up, which doesn't need to be there, I think, and which, if done in a more sensitive way, could be really open up the city quite magnificently, I think.
And just to finish that, I think there's also a missed opportunity. I think it could be. I think the links between Regenerate Christchurch and its processes and decision making could hook us in a stronger way. It's not just what it does do; it's that there's a missed opportunity here.
Jessica, Barnaby, thank you both for your time this afternoon and for the material and effort that you've put in. Certainly helpful and appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, can I call